Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about something that everybody's talking about, and that is the Hunger Games. The newest Hunger Games book, Sunrise on the Reaping, has been out, I think, barely 2 weeks, maybe not even 1 week, but everybody's been talking about it. And now the thing with me and bandwagons is that I usually don't get on them. I like to sit by the side of the road and watch them pass. But this time I actually managed to find something to talk about before everybody went on to something else, so that's great. So today I thought it would be fun to share with you some of my controversial Hunger Games takes. These are opinions that most people probably, I think, would disagree with me on, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll find out that I'm actually not in the minority on these. The first one is that the 74th Hunger Games careers aren't likable. A lot of people rightly say, well, Cato, Clove, Marvel, and Glimmer, they were victims as well. And that is absolutely correct. I think Suzanne Collins drove that home very well at the end of the 74th Hunger Games with the whole Cato's death, where it went so far that I think nobody could say he deserves that. So I'm not even disputing that. I'm not saying they aren't victims. They have been brainwashed from a very young age, and also they just want to survive. But that doesn't make them likable. They were antagonists for a reason. They got into that arena and they were willing to kill anybody and everybody, no matter how weak they were. There was one tribute that didn't even get a name, a young crippled boy. They were absolutely fine with killing him. And see, that's the thing with the Hunger Games, right? Targeting strong people or defending yourself, honestly, it is understandable. However, what they did, target everybody, especially the weak people. Even if you like the Hunger Games, that can hardly be considered sporting. You know what I mean? It can hardly be considered fair, even if you agree with the whole games. I think the boy with the crippled leg was killed in the bloodbath. There was the girl who was just sleeping that they killed. There was Rue, who got caught in a net and was killed by a spear. And in none of those instances do they show the slightest bit of hesitation. Well, the crippled boy we didn't see, but in all the other ones, not even the tiniest bit of hesitation. And so once again, they may have been indoctrinated into that type of thinking, but that doesn't make them likable. If you've been indoctrinated into being a bad person, you're still a bad person. You know what I mean? Another thing is, a lot of people, especially movie watchers, they really like Clove because, the actress for her, she's pretty and she's, I don't know, she has something about her that makes you kind of, if you look at her, it makes you want to like her. Clove was not a nice person. Clove was legit about to carve Katniss's face up for no reason. And so I think my main point here is that yes, you can absolutely agree that the careers were victims. They were just children. To a large extent, they were indoctrinated into thinking the way that they did. But at the end of the day, they were all at least 16 years old, which is a point in your life at which you do start to be able to make your own decisions. And they were absolutely willing to kill weak people or to torture people for fun. Because you can say, right, oh, Clove was just going to torture Katniss because she wanted to give the audience a spectacle. She didn't enjoy it. She did. She was so gleeful in that entire exchange. She was so excited. And then she was scared when she was going to die, which then shows you, she's just a kid. She doesn't want to die, which is fair, but she was also an unlikable kid at the end of the day. There is a difference between acknowledging the tragedy of someone's story and acknowledging the fact that they were victims and that people were unfair to them, and having to like them as a person and excusing every single thing that they do wrong because they were indoctrinated. Just because you were indoctrinated doesn't mean you don't have a small bit of responsibility. You still have to take responsibility for your actions. My second controversial take is that the Capitol's reaction in Catching Fire when Peeta said if it weren't for the baby is not an indication that the Capitol is anti-abortion, and it also does not actually seem to be a criticism of anti-abortion people in real life. So we're in the second quarter quell. The president has announced that in these games, the contestants, the tributes, will be reaped from the existing pool of victors, which means that if you already won the games, you now stand a chance to get thrown back in. People are obviously upset because now their darlings, their heroes, their favorite characters are going to maybe be killed off. It's kind of the same way we would feel if our favorite author decided to get all of the characters from their past books who now have happy, fulfilled lives and decided to throw them all in battle, and only one or two of them is going to survive, right? The capital audience is not pleased. Then there's all these interviews. Obviously, all of the victors are trying to play the capital as much as possible, the audience. And then Peter comes on. During his interview, he drops a bombshell. He's like, well, this whole cortical pool of victors thing is kind of unfortunate for us because we actually secretly got married and Katniss is pregnant. Uproar, everybody's mad, people are shouting to stop the games. And this is where readers will say, okay, here we see parallels with people who are anti abortion. Because they say the audience was okay with killing 23 children a year for their own entertainment just last year. And now suddenly, when it's an unborn child, they are against it. Just like pro lifers who are against, who don't do anything to help born children, they don't care about them, they only care about unborn babies. Now, I'm not going to even get into the accusation against pro-life people. That is a topic for a different video. What we are going to focus on today is the comparison accurate? And I do not think it is. Firstly, I want to analyze, do we think abortion would actually be illegal or looked down upon in the capital? And to be clear, we are talking about the capital elite audience right now. We are not talking about the working class capital population. I do think they exist. I don't believe they have enough AVOXes to keep the entire city running by itself. To me, there must be hardworking, normal people in the capital who maybe are more of a middle class type situation. So I'm talking about the capitalites who were the top layer who had enough money to spend on tickets to the interviews, because you can't tell me those weren't incredibly expensive, especially for this quarter quell. So we're talking about the elites of the elites. What we have seen from them is that the one thing that is most important to them is pleasure. Pleasure for themselves. It's apparently very normal to eat so much that you physically cannot fit more into your belly and then just go throw up so you can eat more. A lot of them are absolutely willing to sleep with underage children. It's very much a it's all about me type world, where everything is about pleasure. Now, do we think that a society that does not care about others, would prefer to not take responsibility, a society that is all for pleasure, would be against abortion? And I think what's at play here is our tendency to want to assume that all the bad guys in movies and books disagree with us on every single thing that we believe, right? If we see the capitalites, we want to say, oh yeah, they would disagree with us politically on every single thing. I don't want to have anything in common with them. But the thing is, it doesn't work like that. Cultures are layered, cultures are more complicated than that. And genuinely, I don't think you could make a good argument for capitalites disliking abortion. To be fair, we haven't gotten much of an indication of what normal everyday life is like. For example, we don't know what the general consensus is about unprotected versus protected sex. We don't actually know how much of the elite is involved in the actual victor trafficking scheme, right? But from what we have seen, I think it's safe to assume that if a capitalized woman did get pregnant, that she would not be against abortion. Once again, this is a culture that is all about pleasure and enjoyment and having fun. If a woman realized that she was about to have to spend 9 months carrying a baby and feeling sick and not being able to do all the fun things that she was able to before, like drink, she couldn't eat certain foods, etc., etc. And then after the 9 months, it wouldn't be over. She would still have that child. Now she would have to raise it for 20 plus years. In a society that's all about instant and self-gratification, I don't think abortion would be looked down upon. I think it would genuinely just be seen as a way to fix a problem. Another thing is that I don't believe Snow would profit much by making it illegal, at least in the capital. What would be his motive for doing that? I actually think it would be bad for President Snow if more capitalites had children, because being close to children probably would make the capitalites realize a bit more what they're doing to other people's children, even if it's just a little bit. But that's what experience tells us. A lot of people don't care about the situation until it becomes personal to them. So I think that if capitalites had children, once that child hits age 12, there might be people who start to at least have a little bit of thinking going on up here. You know what I mean? And I don't think that President Snow would like that. The idea that the capital would be against abortion is kind of crazy to me. I really don't see how you can defend that opinion. I don't see if anybody else can tell me why they think without this scene, right? Without the if it weren't for the baby scene, if you can actually give me actual evidence from the society itself that they might be against abortion, please tell me, because I do not see it. Might abortion be illegal in the districts? Yes, absolutely. That might definitely be the case. But capital citizens, the people we are talking about right now, probably would have no clue. They don't know diddly squat about what is going on in the districts, so they wouldn't know. And then, of course, there's the question of whether the capital actually cares about Katniss's baby. That's the second part. I do not think that they actually care about the baby as a baby. And I'll explain that. So how it seems to me that the capital views the victors and the tribute is kind of how we view characters in a story, right? For example, for me, when Finnick died, that was sad, but it wasn't as devastating as it would be if some guy I actually knew died. You know what I mean? If a character in a story gets hurt or dies, we do feel sad, but in a different way from when actual people die, you know? And we don't consider doing bad things to characters in a story evil, right? If I went out and punched a child on the street, that would be bad. But if I wrote a story in which a child gets punched, depending on the type of story, obviously, but that in and of itself isn't necessarily bad. Um, that's why online we see authors talking so often about how they put their favorite characters through the most awful things, and that's because we don't consider that evil, as long depending once again depending on how you do it. We would consider it very evil if you did those things to real people. And I think that's how the capital has been taught to view the tributes. I think they've been taught to view them as just characters in a story. They're not real people. They're just these interesting personalities who get pulled out from the reaches of the district, out from the wilds and from the middle of nowhere, and get put in here in the capital, in the only place that matters. And now they are privileged enough to be part of a story. And when they die, oh, that's a character. Oh, there goes my bet. But that's it. When they win, they are now a favorite of somebody, right? Katniss and Peeta, they were the star-crossed lovers. And the capital feels they haven't actually been everywhere, as we the readers know, but the capital thinks they've been present for the entire love story ever since Peeta admitted his love to Katniss, right? They've been there while Katniss realized her love for Peeta. They've been there when they were willing to die together. They've been there when Peeta proposed. They've been there when Katniss picks out wedding dresses or whatever. And so they feel like they've been part of the story. They feel entitled to seeing this story unfold. The same way if an author wrote part one of a book in which characters realize their love for each other, and then in the next book, we feel like we deserve to know more about the characters. Like, of course, we don't feel like we deserve the author's time, but you get what I mean, right? The capital kind of owns Katniss and Peeta in that sense, that they feel like they deserve to be there because these are their characters. They're allowed to see whatever it is they're doing. And so they've been there, right? And in the capital's eyes, this is a typical love story. And much like we readers, they like it when a love story goes the way they expect it to. They want a happy ending. So they've seen, okay, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the baby in the baby carriage, right? It's the idyllic love story. Perfect, everything's going well. They have a family, perfect ending, but we are going to, we're going to be there, we're going to watch the children grow, we're going to, exclaim and say, oh, I had a part in that because I sponsored them, you know. because obviously they're going to want to be there for the rest of these people's lives. Those children are not going to have any privacy. And so now um, PETA is definitely playing them, but what they care about is not the baby. What they care about is their idealized love story between PETA and Katniss. They don't even actually care about the real PETA and Katniss because they haven't seen them. They've seen the capital propaganda version of PETA and Katniss, and they are upset that their story is going to be cut short. Yes, there are probably a few emotions like, oh, that's unfair. There's probably some empathy, but they probably couldn't care less about that baby in any other situation. At the end of the day, it's just a bad comparison because the Capitol does not actually care for this baby. The Capitol is probably not anti abortion. So that's a pretty controversial opinion. Honestly, at the end of the day, of course, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I think the reason a lot of people like this theory is because it sounds pretty smart and it criticizes a group of people they dislike. So they just don't really think much further. My last controversial opinion is that I don't believe that Haymitch's reaction to the parade in the original Hunger Games movie was that deep. So let me explain, and it's got to do with Sunrise on the Reaping, so spoilers for that. So in Sunrise on the Reaping, we learned that during Haymitch's games, during the parade, the horses kind of went haywire, and one of the tributes from 12 actually died then and not during the games. And during the first Hunger Games movie, during the 74th parade, Haymitch kind of grimaces and looks down during Katniss and PETA's parade. And a lot of people are saying, oh, look, but that's because he's remembering his games and his parades when everything went so wrong. And in universe, that's a fine explanation. But in a meta sense, saying that this means Suzanne has been planning this all along doesn't make a lot of sense. And I do see that. A lot of fans are saying either this means Suzanne has been planning it all along, or she has written Haymitch so well and Woody Harrelson understands Haymitch so well that even though his prequel was written years later, you can still see the elements of the prequel shine forth in the movie, which doesn't make sense to me. I'm sorry, but you're looking for a deeper meaning behind something that always made sense. Grimacing and looking down during a parade in which children are dressed up in front of an audience that is thirsting for their blood is a very normal reaction. And before the Sunrise on the Reaping, nobody was saying, I wonder why he reacted that way. Does Suzanne have something up her sleeve? No, everybody was saying, oh yeah, no, nobody even thought about it, honestly. I'm not saying Suzanne couldn't have planned this all along, but saying that this is a proof of that is kind of silly, because I genuinely see people out there being like, oh, but his reaction makes sense now. What do you mean now? It always made sense. That was always a normal way to react. Once again, yes, it is cool that in universe it lines up so well, right? But that doesn't necessarily have to mean that it was done on purpose, and saying that it has to have been done on purpose is kind of silly, because I believe even if Sunrise on the Reaping had never been a thing, that reaction would still have been totally normal and probably would have happened in a movie. It doesn't take a genius writer or a genius director or a genius actor to realize that grimacing is a normal reaction given the circumstances. So I just don't think it's that deep. There are a lot of other great examples that show you how good Suzanne's writing is and how well the universe fits together, but this is honestly just not it. So yeah, I have to finish the video now because my storage space is running out, and also my little brother just brought along a couple of friends to have a sleepover with, so my peace and quiet is about to be disturbed. Not really, they're very polite. So that was it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please tell me what you thought. I am anticipating a lot of people disagreeing with me, but maybe I'm wrong, and I'll see you next time. Bye!